Hello everybody, this is a presentation about academic presentations. So before we start, as always, be sure to share, like the videos, find out more on YouTube or my website, academicteeth.com, also on Facebook and Instagram. So by academic presentations, we mean the presentations that we'll do at university on our university courses, which are obviously, a very common feature. I don't know if all courses have them, but I'm inclined to, think that way. And presentations can be tricky for many of us, especially if we're not used to standing up in front of a group, or if we don't like standing up in front of the group. And remember, not everybody does, of course. And obviously, if they're assessed, they can be quite nerve-wracking, and they require a lot of planning and practice to do them effectively. So we're going to look at some ideas and suggestions and examples of what we can do. So before you even start your presentation, before you even start planning it, you've got to find out these answers. What will you be assessed on? That's important. Have a firm idea of the marking criteria that's going to be used. Often it'll feature areas such as planning, delivery, pronunciation, references, that kind of thing. So be clear what you're going to be assessed on, and also if each assessment criteria is equal. Are they all 20%? Is some value placed more on another? And if so, you might want to focus on that particular area more. Be aware of how it connects to any assignments that you're working on, because usually they will. And so, you might be able to use assignments to give you more details or background to your presentation. How long will it be? When will it be? Who will be there? And again, you might think, oh, these are basic questions. I suppose they are, but they're important because the length will determine obviously how much planning and practice you need to do. When will it be? I mean, be clear, what day it is, what date, morning, afternoon, what room will it be in? These are things that we might leave until the last minute, and we can get a bit stressed if we don't know. Who will be there? Will it be just you and, say, a teacher? Will it be you in front of the whole class? Will it just be half the class? Will it just be a small group? And again, this might affect the way you approach it, or it might actually have an influence on your nerves, for example. And also be aware of what you can do and what you can't do in terms of what are you expected to do, and be able to use what, say, equipment can you use, what equipment can't you use, what kind of expectations does the teacher have in terms of delivery and the way the ideas are communicated. So the presentation, we've got the iceberg slide. So we can see the presentation on top, which is obviously what people see. That's all we see, is that we see the presentation organized and it looks good and it sounds good. But beneath the presentation, or behind the presentation, you've got all these other areas that need to be investigated and done before you can deliver an effective presentation. So even when you're looking at people's presentations and going, oh, yeah, that's a good presentation, don't forget that that person had to do a lot of planning, spend time and practice to make the presentation effective. So, and that's something that we can't neglect. Okay, now planning is obviously important. So think about what you already know about the topic that you've got to deliver on. Do you feel quite confident? Do you feel quite knowledgeable? Is it a completely new area that you need to spend time looking at? What areas do you need to research? You might find this from the question that you've been given. One thing I would also suggest is try and know more than the presentation itself. So if you're delivering a presentation on a particular topic, if you can try and read more widely than the topic, this will give you more confidence, and it will also help you deal with potential questions at the end, because questions at the end can be a little bit nerve-wracking because you don't know what's going to be asked. So if you know more about the topic, if you know more than the people there, then the chances are you'll be able to give more detailed answers and also be a bit more relaxed during the presentation. Know who your audience is. What do they know? What don't they know? Are they specialists? In other words, are they people who are studying exactly the same area as you? Or will they be studying a different area? Because depending on what and who you're presenting to, it might just be a group of students who are studying the same subject, but also it might be to a group of students and you're all studying slightly different subjects, or you're all studying slightly different aspects of the subject. So, you know, if the audience is quite general, not experts, then you might need to give more information and use simpler language and explain more so they understand. Also consider any questions you could be asked. Okay, I don't know, you can't obviously predict that well, but you know, the questions that you're asked should be related to what you're speaking about, of course. So consider those questions so you've got some answers already handy. Now, one way to look at a presentation is the way you look at an academic essay, because they do have strong similarities. So they are focused on a particular subject area. An essay and a presentation has an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. An academic essay has paragraphs. An academic presentation has paragraphs as well in terms of what you're speaking about. They both have academic language. They both need evidence to support their ideas. And they would both use references. So on the screen, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, obviously, I know there are differences because it's condensed and it's spoken, but really, an essay and a presentation are very similar. So the introduction to the start of your essay is obviously important. Sorry, start of your presentation is important. So a few things to do. So wait for the audience to listen before you start. Don't just start speaking while they are talking. You know, the chances are that you'll be going after somebody. Okay, you might go to the start, of course. But if you're following someone who's just finished, the audience might get a bit restless, especially if it's a long day. So wait for them to calm down before you start, or let the teacher get people's attention before you start. Greet the audience, introduce yourself and your subject. Okay. There's different ways you might begin. You might capture your listeners' attention with a question, a quote, a statistic, or a startling comment, like a hook statement. Now, these are just to get the audience thinking or interested. You don't have to do these, but often they can be useful. You know, you could say, have you ever thought about, or have you considered, or it could be a stat, you know, according to so-and-so, 85% of, I mean, just at the audience to go, oh, right, I never knew that, or that's interesting, just to get them engaged. State the purpose of your presentation in your introduction. Define any vocabulary as appropriate. So if you're going to speak about technical areas, make sure the audience knows what the vocabulary means. And also present an outline of the talk. Very similar to the way you'd present an outline of an essay. You know, you present an outline of an essay in your introduction. So you present an outline of your talk at the start of your presentation. The main body, well, obviously this is the big bit, the same way the main body is the important part of an essay or assignment. So present the points one by one in a logical order. Now you might prefer to start with the most important point first, or maybe end with the most important point. I think it's probably better to end with the most important point because it has a stronger effect on the audience. At the end of each point, or each, say, mini paragraph, you might say, pause at the end. Let people take what you're saying in, digest what you're saying. And it might be a bit strange to have a bit of silence, And it only needs to be for a few seconds, not 30 seconds, say 3 or 4 seconds, and then go to the next part. Also, because you want the audience to join you, so to speak, so when so it's not the audience not to go too far behind or fast forward, make it clear to the audience when you move to another point. So use appropriate language like on the screen for that. And use clear examples that illustrate your point. The key point there is clear examples. Examples that people who don't know your subject would understand. So from this as well so far, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, make sure the language you use is there to show transition and signaling to when you're going to move to new points or introduce new ideas. The conclusion, so you would summarize the main points like you would in an essay. You might restate the purpose of your talk, what you did, what you intended to do, and thank the audience and invite questions. Now, no, don't rush this. Don't just say, that's my conclusion. Any questions? No. Pause. Thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions? Something like that. Don't rush it. That I've seen many times students just rushing the conclusion and then going, okay, thank you, questions? Or something similar. And it's like, no, calm, slow it down. Don't be in a rush. Yeah. Condense, condense, condense. Now, this is related to our notes and how you can make your presentation more focused for you so you remember more. So one way I would suggest is firstly write your presentation out in full. Know exactly what you're doing, all of it. Then practice it. You might just read it. The first time you practice, you might just read your notes or the presentation aloud. That's fine. But after the first time, try and reduce the presentation again. Make notes from the full presentation. Practice that. Then keep reducing it again until you just have the main points. Practice this again. So each time the information, because you're repeating it, is going inside your head and you're remembering it. And also the amount of information you've got on cards or notes is getting smaller. So at the end, we have cue cards, like the image on the right, which are basically just cards or paper, small bits of paper. So not big A4, just small bits of paper, would just have your notes, the points you need to remember. And also they might contain things you might forget to say. Just don't obviously write whole sentences, because the temptation is to read from your cards, and that's not good, because you then look down when you're reading, and you don't want to do that. When you're speaking, you want to look at the audience, look down for the information, raise the head up when you speak. So that's something to practice. But cue cards, it helps in a lot of ways. So condense, 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 and practice to get the condensing down to a good level for you. Delivery, obviously you're going to be marked on how you deliver the presentation, how you come across to the audience. So as I mentioned on the other slide, look at the audience when you speak, not your cards. So if you're aware from any practice that sometimes you look down a bit too much at your cards, consciously be aware, look up. A nice clear voice. Doesn't have to be too loud, just clear. If you have difficulty pronouncing different, certain words, then spend time practicing. There's no excuse for not practicing pronunciation of words you find difficult, because if you pronounce the words wrong, the audience will not understand those words. So it's vital you do this. Have an awareness if you speak too fast or too slow, and obviously be aware of the time you've got. And obviously when you've practiced, you'll know if you've gone over time or if you're too much under time. Use word stress to emphasize important points. So don't have a monotone delivery of no. you raise the voice, emphasize. The voice might go a little bit stronger, a little slightly louder to emphasize important points, just so these things stand out. It's really important that you use your voice well when you deliver your presentation. Language, well, of course, language is essential because obviously you're using language to speak. So consider the vocabulary that you're going to need for your audience. As I said, are they specialists? Are they not? And if they are not, then use more simpler vocab. Signposting language is essential, the same way it's essential for an essay. Some examples here. So moving on to your next point, an additional point. Again, think of it like an essay. As I've said many times, you need signpostings to guide the audience in your presentation, the same way you'd use it to guide a reader in an assignment. When you refer to visuals, introduce the chart. Words for describing data, be specific as well. Use language to give explanations and reason. This may be because, this could be due to, that kind of thing. And also introduce different viewpoints, because remember, it is academic, so you want to show different areas where people agree and disagree. So again, introduce them. However, Smith disagrees and believes. And also use language for cause and effect as you need to. So there's a lot of language ideas here. So as I said, use these to introduce your main ideas. Body language, important, of course. Now, a few things to remember. Now, eye contact. Now, if you find eye contact difficult, just look at people's heads. Just look in their direction. You don't have to look at the eyes, but just don't look down and don't stare at the ceiling. Okay. When you're standing, try not to stand like a robot, not too rigid. A little bit of relaxation in those arms and the shoulders. But on the other hand, don't be too relaxed. Don't be moving around too much. Okay. Have an area around yourself where you might move around, so to speak. But don't be moving in front of the screen and moving behind the monitor and things like that. Try and stay not fixed, but in a kind of, excuse me, in a general position where you can move slightly left and slightly right. When you are using words to emphasize your ideas, use hand gestures as well. Don't worry about waving your hands around. That's fine. It shows you're interested. And, the audience becomes more aware and more involved, I think. Okay, visuals. Now, you chances are you'll be assessed on the visual you use. So understand before you start what format, what guidelines are expected, what can you use, what can't you use, how creative can you be? Can you use videos? Can you not use videos? That kind of thing. What size font are you expected to use? What type of font? Don't read your slides to the audience, okay? So when you're looking at a slide, don't read them. The audience can do that. You remember the slides are for what you don't say. So you might have charts or examples of data on the screen. So that's why I said don't read the slides. The slides are for examples, that kind of thing. Let the audience read the slides themselves. Don't be too crazy with the animation, or don't use any animation, because it's not going to go down well with the audience or the person assessing it, because the visuals are there to support your ideas. Most of your ideas, most of your assessments will be on what you say and how you say it, not really what you show. What you say is far more important, so focus more on that bit. Stay in control, one point at a time. The way I'm doing this presentation to you here, I'm clicking on the mouse, so you don't read too far ahead. So don't have all the information on the same time. Be in control. It's your presentation. Guide the audience. Some other points about visuals. Keep the colors simple. like this. The colors here are simple. We've got like a sort of brownish grey background, a light blue square in the middle, and the type is in black. So keep the colors simple. Resist the temptation to have fancy fonts. Calibri, Arial, those kind of fonts are fine. Stick with them. Make sure that everyone can see the font size. So if necessary, practice, go to the room you're doing the presentation in and see for yourself if you can see it, if you can read it. One main idea per slide. Think one main idea per paragraph, one main idea per slide. Not too many points, no paragraphs per slide. Bullet points are your friend. 4 to 5 points, I would say. And make sure everything's fine. The grammar's good, the spelling's correct, and the writing is clear. Make sure you have references and citations. You can have citations as you go on the slides, and at the end, you can have a reference slide. The same way you'd have for an essay, exactly the same. One thing to bear in mind as well, which gets neglected, is content for all. So this is for maybe learners who are visually impaired or maybe have learning difficulties with presentations. So a few points here. So avoid serif fonts. So serif fonts are the fonts which have got nice little fancy curls at the end. No, avoid serif fonts. So don't use Times New Roman, use Arial or Calibri or something similar. So avoid serif fonts. Use align left rather than justify. So have the words to the left of the screen or left of the square. Remember, don't use italics or capital letters where possible. If you're going to emphasize a word in a presentation on a slide, use bold. Don't rely on the different colors because they can be distracting. I said use bold to emphasize rather than colors. When you're doing your images, look where the text is. Make sure the text does not go over the images so the images are clear. Don't have crazy animation. And if you have different learners, so if you have maybe second language learners, maybe print out the slides before you do the presentations, they can read them before, or at the same time if anyone's visually impaired or has any specific learning difficulty that you need to be aware of. And you can get this information from the teacher if you're not sure. So it's all about being inclusive. So one way to do this as well is if you're using PowerPoint, when you go on your PowerPoint screen, on your PowerPoint, the actual making the slides, if you click onto File and then Info, it brings up this little box where it says check for issues, and you can expect the document for hidden properties. You can check for accessibility. So accessibility, go for the accessibility one, click on that one and see what PowerPoint thinks are areas you might need to look at to improve it. Okay, so this is available on PowerPoint itself. It's important that you actually do it yourself. Consider what your experience is of presentations. You might be aware of areas you need to improve on from previous feedback. Equally, if you've never done a presentation, just be honest with yourself what areas you think you're going to find difficult. These might be areas such as timing. Do you go over time? Do you go under time? Do you speak too quickly? What's your body language like? That kind of thing. Areas you need to improve in. Also have an image of yourself doing it well. Maybe feel into it, visualize yourself. It's going to be fine. Run through it mentally in your head a few times. Remember, nerves are natural. Everyone gets nervous. Don't be complacent. I'd rather be a little bit nervous than too overconfident. Overconfidence is not good either. And 5 minutes does go really fast in a presentation. But try and do a practice in the actual classroom where you're being assessed. So you get a feel of the class, the atmosphere, the lighting, that kind of thing. And also if the computer works. Practice, practice, practice. Maybe a little bit more practice. Don't leave it until the last minute. Definitely not. A couple of slides on resources, useful resources. University of Melbourne has some good ideas about effective presentations. So we just search University of Melbourne presentations. YouTube has some good examples. You just type in university presentations. And also YouTube has some 3 minutes theses, which is where students are, basically delivering their 3 minutes or PhD thesis in 3 minutes. And it's good to see how much information they can get into 3 minutes and the way they do this. And that's quite effective. It's hard, but it's really interesting to see, and it might give you some ideas. Here are some useful resources for inclusivity. There's one for the University of Hull there. Now, I know it's probably difficult to type in that link there, but there is the link. But if you just type in University of Hull Designing for Diverse Learners, it comes up with a nice little chart of what to do. And the British Dyslexia Association also has some good, very simple resources about how to make presentational slides more effective in terms of colors and font size and that kind of thing. They're both useful. Okay. So thanks for watching. I hope it was useful. As always, if you have any comments, I'd really be pleased to hear them. And if you are doing a presentation, I hope it goes well. I'm sure it will. Remember, practice.